have it here. It's page 48 when I'm looking for it again, okay? So you guys remember that. Lonnie Lilbert, what I was saying was like the previous book that took place up on the reservation was As the Crow Flies. And what I've discovered is like after you get like about 15 or 20 books together, you got to really go back, like, you know, and think about what it is you wrote, especially if you're covering ground that you covered before. And there were a lot of really, a lot of characters I really enjoyed writing, like that. And of course, they're all based off of people that I know, like that. And the joke that I always make about this, of course, is that, you know, everybody does that. Every author does it, but not every author lives in a state that only has 500,000 people in it. So whenever I like use somebody as a character, I'll be down in Rock Springs, like at a library event, and somebody will say, "Is that so and so from Gillette that's in your third book?" And I have to go, I can neither confirm or deny maybe the person you just mentioned. And then it gets even worse up on the res, because there are only 5,000 enrolled members of the Northern Cheyenne tribe. So when I use one of them in my books, they all know who I'm talking about. Like, and so, and I can't remember what it was. I was doing an interview with UPI earlier this week, and they said, "Well, does anybody ever get angry with you, you know, whenever you stick them in one of the books?" And I was like, "No, they get angry when I don't stick them in the books." There's still people that are lobbying, you know, to try and get in the books. And so one of these characters, like Lonnie Lilbert, is one of my favorites. I just love Lonnie. And he's based off of a good friend of mine who passed away just last year, Charles Whiteman. And he was a tribal elder, like that, and he had an incredible sense of humor. But anyway, this is what takes place, you know, actually in Lonnie's office on the res. He also maybe point out, like that Barrett Long, Lonnie's previous assistant, Walt kind of absconded with him, and he's now a part-time dispatcher down in the Upshur County Sheriff's Department. Yeah. And so now here we're going to get to meet his replacement. "I do not think that this new young man is going to work out." Yes, it is so. Glancing around Lonnie Littlebird's office, I couldn't help but have a little wall envy. The head chief of the great Northern Cheyenne Nation had certificates of achievement from 4 different presidents of the United States, an official that Lonnie begrudgingly recognized, documentations of great service from every part of Montana, another bureaucracy he attempted to pay no heed, and credentials of a lofty success from every facet of Indian country. "You got a Nobel Peace Prize up here somewhere, Lonnie?" The old chief ignored me as the young man in question entered, bearing a tray overloaded with a coffee pot, cups, saucers, milk, sugar, and silver spoons, which he carefully slid onto Lonnie's mammoth oak desk. The young man stood, his hair parted to the right, ironed shirt and polished shoes at the ready. "Will there be anything else, Chief?" Lonnie ushered him away with a vague wave of the hand, but then joined us in watching him go as the glass paneled door with the tribal seal and Lonnie's name in gold leaf quietly closed behind him. Henry reached over and began pouring coffee for the 3 of us. "What's his name?" "You know? I don't know." Lonnie sat back in his wheelchair and thought. "Willard. His name is Willard." He thought about it some more. "Wasn't there a movie about a rat named Willard?" The bear finished pouring and set Lonnie's cup in a saucer. "I think the rat's name was Ben, and the boy's name was Willard." The chief leaned over, looking enough through the frosted glass to see if the young man might be loitering near. I could see Willard controlling rats. Taking my coffee, I stood and walked over to the Hall of Fame, sure that wherever I looked long enough, I'd see the heads of the enemies who had underestimated the legless man. "He seems like a nice kid to me." Lonnie waited patiently as Henry, familiar with the old chief's tastes, dropped 2 cubes of sugar in his coffee, and then added a spoon before sliding the cup and saucer the rest of the way in front of him. "Yeah, you'll think that until the rats come." I turned to look at him. He sipped his coffee and glanced up at me. "He's too polite. I'm always thinking he's up to something." I shook my head and sipped my own coffee. "You want your old driver back?" At the sound of Barrett Long, the old man brightened. "How's he doing?" "Fantastic. He's dispatching on weekends and covering for Ruby whenever she wants a day off." "Ruby. That is that good-looking woman in your office." Pushing 80, I was pretty sure my dispatcher would have been pleased at being described as such. "One of them. Has he gotten his gun yet?" "No. He'll have to go through training down in Douglas before he's armed." "He wants a gun." "I know, but even your police chief wouldn't give him one." "She is a harsh woman." "Yes, it is so. You're her boss. If you want him to have one, you could just order her to give her brother a gun." He shook his head and stared into his coffee. "I'm just the chief. Doesn't that mean that everybody has to do what you say?" He glanced at Henry, who rolled his eyes. "No, hardly anybody does what I say." Lonnie sat his cup down and looked at me again. You want to buy some of my commendations? I'll make you a deal. I gesture with my cup. They've got your name on them, Lonnie. Oh, a little whiteout, and you can get any name you want on them. He leaned back, placing his fingers on the leather blotter that spread out before him. How about this desk? Would you like to buy this desk? Lonnie, it's your desk. Not really. The thief who had the position before me stole it and had it brought in here. He pulled open a drawer and then slid it closed. I keep looking for all the money he stole, but I haven't found it yet. Lonnie, have you heard about the situation with Jaya Long? Ah, the basketball player. Henry nodded. Yeah. The threats against her life? I came back and sat, resting my cup on the purloined desk. Yes. One moon. That is a tragic family. The grandfather, he is a good man, and his wife, they tried to keep their daughter safe, but somehow they could not keep her on the straight and narrow. That is the way sometimes. Do you know of anyone who might know who's been threatening Jaya? There are the usual threats whenever our players go out into the white world, but these people are only misguided and not particularly dangerous, just racially overly enthusiastic. He glanced at me. But we have a case? Well, what do you know about the sister, Jeannie? The old saying among my people is that you never conquered an enemy until their women's hearts are on the ground. But what if there are no women at all? He looked up at me. That is why I'm glad to have you here, my friend. I'm hoping that you can help us from this most horrible of atrocities. How many Native women have gone missing here, Lonnie? Close to 300 missing person reports last year alone. We make up only 6.7% of the population here in Montana, but account for 26% of the missing persons, the majority of whom are women. Most of our cases are closed within a day or two. Runaway teenagers, tribal police find them walking the roads, or child custody cases that are resolved. But the statistics remain that our people make up more than a quarter of the ones who go missing in the state. We're gonna have to go around and knock on some doors, maybe ask some uncomfortable questions. He glanced at me. You are asking for my blessing? I guess we are. The bear sipped his coffee and then lowered his cup onto the saucer. Lonnie, have you ever heard of the Ovetse Heomese? He started. His face, we could see the words resting something deep within him. I have not heard that term since I was a child. But you have heard it. There was a girl I knew. She was strange and something of an outsider who just didn't fit in anywhere. You would see her out on places where nobody was, all alone. I remember my mother told me to not be like her, that the Ovetse Heomese would come and take me if I lingered too long from the company of the people. One day in the schoolyard, I saw her standing out by the fence, and I went to her. I told her that if she persisted in this, that the Ovetse Heomese would come and take her away. And all she said was that at least somebody would want her. He reached out and took his coffee, holding it in both hands as if attempting to stay warm. I told my mother about this, and that she said I should befriend this young girl and look out for her. The next day I went to school with a great deal of emotion, ready to tell this girl that I was her newfound friend and that I would protect her. He took a sip of his coffee. She was gone, and I never heard of her spoken of again. We waited, but he was silent. Lonnie, he looked up at me. You have my blessing. That's all you get for one night.
No, we got books, we can go home.
That's always the benefit of a book signing, right?